Okay, so this video is about sociology and the social sciences in general. Um, so, in the past century, we've had a particular overarching mode of thought called postmodernism, which basically is the rejection of any kind of ultimate standard or meaning to studying society or understanding society. There's no core shared value. Everything is pretty much relative beyond our biological and genetic differences, which aren't apparent, which aren't that different to begin with. So culture is relative. There is no objective standpoint. We can't map out cultural evolution very easily. It's very complex, and these are all pretty good developments for sociology and social sciences in general, because beforehand we had a lot of backwards views such as social Darwinism and eugenics, which tried to create some overarching objective view of human beings in general, and it ended up not being very accurate or realistic and missed all the details and all the relative aspects, the complexities behind it, often at the expense of those who were different. So postmodernism was the answer to that. But in turn, postmodernism has had its own shortcomings, which tend to be it's too relativistic in an absolute sense. It instead of saying things are complex and relative, it says that things are complex and relative absolutely. Now, never mind the philosophical paradoxes of this, but if you're going to claim that, then all of a sudden you don't have any real instrument to measure um, either the progress of a society um, or the progress of human beings as a civilization in general. Um, Now there have been certain breakthroughs and different paradigms that have been emerging, such as the whole study of cultural evolution. Um, it These sort of things are trying to say, look, yes, things are complex, but there is also a bigger point of view. There's a bigger perspective, and this is what's needed. So, like, we have complexity and relativism, but just as you would look at a forest and say, "Wow, look at how complex and organic and dynamic everything is. We can't just map it out in a grid." Okay, we can't. But at the same time, if we have correct instruments, if we have enough data and information, we can take a step back and say, "Look, this isn't just a series of trees. This is a forest, and this type of forest develops this way. This ecosystem of this forest is like this." So we can have, in other words, a bigger picture to things. It just takes time to develop it, and it needs to do two things. One, it needs to be able to account for the relativism and the complexity of societies, because they're very complex. They're not they're not homogeneous. They're heterogeneous, but they still have general tendencies. Um, Here's a good example that I've used this before. If you look at a brain, really up close, it doesn't seem to have any kind of greater structure to it. If you look at the mash of neurons, it doesn't seem to have any kind of greater tendency. But if you start to look back, if you start to back up, you start to see a bigger picture, and all of a sudden, very complex areas of the brain have actual general functions, and all of a sudden you see the brain has a evolution in itself. We have the reptilian brainstem, then we have the mammalian frontal lobe. So the mammalian brain, the reptilian brain, we have this general evolution of growth, and by being able to account for both the complexity and the generality, that's what we need, and this is truly more an integrated, progressive direction. We're going back to the universals and the perennials, and we're not going back to the simplistic ones that reduced everything to very simple arguments and simple diagrams. They're very complex and they account for both things. So I guess you could say we're going into a postmodern world. And because of that, people such as Ken Wilber and Manuel de Landa are writing about this stuff. these people are basically making a case that, look, we need to get over this absolute postmodernism era and start to get to a real science of society. And the social scientists sort of need this. We need these overarching principles, because if we don't have anything to if we don't have any kind of scientific universal to compare things to, that is not it's very difficult to see where we're going, and it's very difficult to understand ourselves. So in the argument, scientific argument to this is absolute relativism is unscientific. It's not founded in reality. Things are complex, but they do have general patterns and tendencies if you look at the bigger picture. So for the first time in history, really, we're getting to the point where we can look at the bigger picture, and that's what we want to do. And I guess I'll go into this a little bit more later.